Hey, how's it going and welcome to another video. So, I just finished Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. I know I'm a little bit, behind the times on this. This game came out a few weeks ago, but I only finished it, yesterday. But I figured I'd make a little video talking about it because it definitely ended up being one of those games that I would describe as, interesting. For, a number of different reasons I'll get into, but I guess I'll start, my expectations going into it. Going all the way back to when it was first sort of announced that it would be another one of those Dragon Ball Z games that basically takes you through the story of Dragon Ball. It's one of those things that on first glance you think, oh man, another one of these fucking games where they go through the story of Dragon Ball Z and we go through the Saiyan Saga and the Frieza stuff and the androids and Buu. But when you really look at, the history of Dragon Ball games, it's actually been a while since we've had a game like that. As of recent, they've been doing a lot more of the kind of Xenoverse, Dragon Ball Fusions, Dragon Ball Heroes kind of stuff. That's just extraneous, wacky, stuff that's outside of the scope of the main story. And the last one that immediately comes to mind that was just a straight retelling of Z was, I think Raging Blast? Or maybe even Battle of Z. I never played that game because it looked awful, but it's been quite a few years, nearly a decade at this point. Since the game has advertised itself as being, experience the story of Dragon Ball Z. And if the main selling point of this game was, this is the definitive video game way to experience the story of Dragon Ball Z, it kind of worked. And I think it's one of those situations, it almost reminds me of, Budokai from way back in the day, to where it works perfectly fine as a summation of the story of Dragon Ball Z. But there's a lot of just little things adding up that makes it, not quite a perfect, even summary, I feel. There's quite a few different scenes missing. There's, new scenes added that are just, really kind of weird. And the presentation is kind of all over the place. So one of the obvious glaring sort of problems I think people have with this game, and I did too, is that the presentation of it really is very peaks and valleys. The game will hit these amazing, incredible peaks to where, the presentation of some of these scenes, I would argue, look better than, how they were in the anime or any past Dragon Ball video game. Shit that just made me go, wow, that was awesome. Some scenes that come to mind are, when Recoome is gonna do the Ultra Fighting Bomber and Goku stops, and, the camera work and the expressions and just the energy of that scene are awesome. Or when Goku and Vegeta fuse into Vegito. Just these awesome, amazing, beautiful looking scenes that are animated so well and they have such a great energy. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you'll have these scenes that just feel so, stilted and awkward. It's the kind of shit that reminds you that you're playing a video game, The kind of scenes where it's oh, that's not Goku, that's Goku's character model standing in place and talking, kinda. And obviously there's no way to make just, random conversations they're having with each other the most exciting, exhilarating thing ever. And sometimes they'll just not even animate it. I remember the scene where, Majin Vegeta tricks Goku into thinking they're gonna team up and then he bops him over the head to knock him out. That scene is just not animated. It's, still frames of the characters just, moving in sequence. And sometimes that's fine, but I feel for those pretty major scenes like that, I don't think that deserves just put a couple of PNGs up on the screen, it's fine. Oh, and another thing is that there are some scenes that are just not even in it. The biggest one that comes to mind is Vegeta does not do the Final Flash. One of the most iconic moments of the Cell Saga and the Dragon Ball Z in general. And then there's a lot of other things that are just, just bizarre. Vegeta kills all the Ginyu Force in the manga and stuff. But in Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, he doesn't. Gohan and Krillin beat Guldo, right? And instead of coming in to chop his head off, his body's kind of just left there. And that also happens with Recoome and Birder, but Jace, he kills Jace. But the other two is just, they just, I don't know, are left there. So that's really odd. Oh, another one I remember, this was fucking weird as hell, was at the very end, the ending scene after they beat Kid Buu and they're all at the lookout. Dende reverts back to his young self from the Namek Saga, instead of the adolescent self he had been for the entire rest of the saga in the game. Just fucking super weird and distracting shit like that. Oh yeah, another thing, Trunks doesn't go Super Trunks, the buff form. And I think out of all of them, like, I might just be crazy, but I feel like the Cell Saga, like, with the androids and all, was especially not given the same tender love and care that as, like, the Frieza Saga or the Saiyans, or even the Buu Saga got. Just feels really slapped together. Like, I don't know if the developers just didn't like the Cell Saga or what, but there's just a lot of these little important moments that are, like, gone or presented in a weird way. Like, Goku doesn't do the instant transmission Kamehameha. Just, like, weird stuff that they either altered or left out. And that's kind of the duality of this game, is the fact that you have some of the best presentation of these scenes ever, and then you also have some of these scenes presented really weird and shitty, and then sometimes they're just cut out. Oh yeah, Candy Vegito is also missing, but there were a few things that they did that they changed around that I really, really liked. Like, Android 16 gets to spend more time with Gohan, so when Gohan, has his complete freak the fuck out when he goes Super Saiyan 2 over 16, it feels a lot more natural. But other than that, and maybe like a few examples I can't think of off the top of my head, very, very peaks and valleys. And obviously, it's not really feasible for them to make every cutscene breathtaking, but I do kind of feel like they sort of missed their shot to make the ultimate definitive video game retelling of Dragon Ball Z. Because they're gonna have to wait a few years to market another game that's like, experience the ultimate retelling of Dragon Ball Z. You've seen the anime, now play the game. Play the anime. That's just not gonna excite people. The combat I enjoyed, but I don't know if I'm just an insane crazy person, but I feel like the difficulty of this game is weird as shit. Like, just from my own personal experience, like, the final fight against Perfect Cell, like, Super Perfect Cell, was legitimately one of the easiest things I've ever done in a video game. And then I got my fucking ass wrecked by, Berter and Jace and, like, Android 20. But, it is an action RPG, so there's all kinds of different ways you can, like, game and cheat the system. You got healing items, you got the cooking shit you can do, you can just grind. But at least from my own weird ass, it did feel very, very strange having, these supposedly climactic battles be, like, really easy. And then Berter and Jace is, like, really hard. Like, whenever you're fighting against 2 or more guys and you're by yourself, that shit is frustrating. But the actual combat, it's fine. It's about what I expected. I could get into a lot of little gripes and just, like, little weird things that I noticed that I didn't like, but it was fun. It was, like, it was pretty repetitive. It is one of those, like, circle, 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 circle kinds of games. That was another thing that fucked me up, was the fact that it's circle to, like, do melee stuff and square is for key, because in Xenoverse it's the other way around. So that took me some getting used to, but otherwise it's fine. It's repetitive, but I feel like it's satisfying enough to where, like, you kind of forget that. Another thing, I think that, like, the biggest impact that this game is going to leave on me is after playing it, I have a much greater appreciation for Gohan. Like, I legitimately kind of think this fucking game should have been called, like, Dragon Ball Z Gohan. Because you play as him, like, for the majority of it. For all the long intermissions between the sagas, you're playing as Gohan, and throughout most of it, you are also Gohan. And Gohan's always been a character that I've liked, but never been super attached to, but I feel like being able to go through this game and kind of play, like, as Gohan and experience it as him made me really enjoy the journey, I guess. Getting to see him grow up and interact with all these different characters. And to me, that's the good shit. That's the sauce, is being able to just experience the world of Dragon Ball and talk to these characters. And just, vicariously living through the whimsical world of Dragon Ball. But yeah, I think that's what Dragon Ball Z Kakarot's legacy is gonna be, for me at least, is the game that, like, really made me appreciate Gohan. So overall, I would say I definitely did enjoy my time with it. It was a lot lengthier than I was expecting it to be. I finished in at about, like, 35 hours. And that's after doing basically every side quest. And so just from, my enjoyment of it and the length of time I played it, I'd say I definitely got my money's worth.